Great. Hello, welcome everyone. This is our first ever live webinar. You can probably tell by some of the technical issues we've already been having, but I think we're in good shape. My name is Stephen Balcom, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Family Online Safety Institute. And I just want to begin by acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances that we find ourselves in with this global pandemic. Obviously, most of us in the United States are now under stay-at-home orders, and this is also true for much of Europe and many parts of Asia. I also want to give a particular welcome to the attendees from Europe and Asia that I see have already come through. So thank you very much for that. I know it's at a very odd hour for many of you, but we would very much welcome your experience, your comments, your questions, which you can use through the Q&A button down at the bottom there. So I will see those as they come up. Send us your questions and comments throughout this webinar. And I also just want to say that wherever you are, I hope that you and your family are healthy and safe and following the guidance of your respective public health officials. So, given these rather extraordinary times, how do we maintain balance in our families' digital lives? What strategies and tools can we use to create some normalcy while our kids are suddenly learning at home and we are struggling to either work remotely or bring in childcare in order to run essential services? How can we create order, prioritize education, forge new routines in the midst of all of this uncertainty? So to help us answer these and many other questions, we have brought together two of my favorite thinkers and doers in this space. Janell Burley Hofmann, she's the author of iRules and waving at you now, what every tech healthy family needs to know about selfies, sexting, gaming, and growing up. She's also an international speaker, facilitator, and consultant, and mother of 5 kids. Is that right, Janell? 5?
That is 5, 12 to 20.
My goodness, thank you for your service. Janell helps schools, youth, families, educators, and organizations on the topics of technology, media, health, relationships, and well-being. And Tiffany Shlain, an Emmy-nominated filmmaker, speaker, and Webby Awards founder, in her first book, 24/6, The Power of Unplugging One Day a Week, she explores her family's decade-long transformative practice of turning off screens on one day each week and the effects of our 24/7 world has had on individuals, our relationships, and our society. And for those of you who attended the FOSI annual conference last year will have seen her brilliant presentation. Welcome, Tiffany.
It's great to be here. 2 of my favorite people to talk with about this subject. So it's going to be a great conversation.
This is going to be exciting. Well, let's start with what is, I have to admit, a very subjective term, balance. How have you both, maybe you haven't, but how have you both tried to create a sense of balance between, let's say, the amount of screen time, non-screen time in your households, or is this simply not possible? Is balance not possible in these rather extraordinary times? Tiffany, why don't I ask you first?
Well, I think the word balance is, actually, I think the earth is getting back into balance right now. That's a more big picture thought about everything that's happening. I felt like our whole society was feeling like everyone was everywhere and nowhere at the same time and never present. So on the one hand, I think about that. In terms of lockdown right now, my family's on screens way more than normal, than our normal structure and attempt at balance. But we're all human. This is a very extraordinary time, as you mentioned. But we are still, and really it feels like a saving grace right now, we turn off all screens one day a week from Friday night to Saturday night. It is given balance. It feels like a big reset each week from all of the, there's been so much great stuff happening online, which is very exciting for me to see the web kind of live up to its potential, but it's a lot of stress and it's taxing my mind and my soul and my brain in new ways by being on so much. And I know for my whole family. So each week when we go off Friday, we make a nice meal. all the screens are off Friday night, and we're Jewish, but we're not religious. We really do this as a practice and have done it for 10 years. And I should say my daughters one's almost 17, one's almost 11. And my husband and I are very into tech. We're not anti-tech, but just not 24/7. And then on the Saturdays have been just my favorite day during this lockdown. I just feel like I can finally think, and we're not all off on separate screens and in separate realities, and we're kind of reconnected for this day. We read, we hang, we do nothing. But it also separates the week because everything's so blurry right now. You don't know what day it is. There's no weekend. So I found it really has helped to kind of separate the week. And we go out and we take a walk. You know, we're allowed to still do that here in the Bay Area where I'm speaking to you from. But, you know, during the week, you know, it feels like we all have to lax what our definition of screen rules are. But I still do kind of some mini interventions, no screens at the dinner table. I don't look at my phone when I first wake up, so I'm not looking at stressful news when I wake up. But the truth is that screens are a lifeline to many of us right now to stay connected with people we love and for school and work and the news. I just feel like we need to really value also stepping away from the screen, really turning it off and really have time to just think and reflect about this moment we're in, because that would be a wasted opportunity if we were just so plugged in and reactive and on the network every second.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And it's a once in a lifetime, maybe once in a century opportunity, as well as this enormous challenge. Janell, balance?
Sure. So I'd like to approach this conversation around balance, recognizing that we're part of a parenting generation that's had more access to information than any other generation before. And there's studies and advice and coming at us with this intensity that often we have to take a step back and remind ourselves of our own sense of empowerment and knowledge and leadership in our own families. And so for me, reconnecting with that sense of what I know is necessary for my own family, so that what was once rigid or perhaps what was once static is dynamic and it's living and breathing, so that the rules and boundaries that we have can be adaptable for all different circumstances. And so for me, that's what balance really means. It's, are we adaptable? And can we be resilient in difficult times to reassess what's working and what isn't, or what might we need right now? So a lot of these big reflective questions help to enhance that sense of balance and that sense of direct honesty for caregivers and parents and adults who are providing support to their young people who are certainly going online more than ever. So again, my kids are 12, 14, 15, 17, and 20, and screens are absolutely a massive part of their life, both for their education, they're all online learning right now, and for their social connection, for their entertainment, for their play. And really, in a lot of ways, it's giving them a sense of normalcy to stay connected to the things and places and people that are important to them. It's giving them an outlet for creativity. It's giving them an opportunity to stay connected to the culture and the issues beyond our own. So for me, there's been this huge exhale around what screen time even means, and reevaluating how it feels necessary and nutritious in a lot of ways, but also how can we still have some boundaries, like a bedtime, like an end of the day, like Tiffany mentioned, a meal time, some opportunities to go outside. So for me, that balance means, are we able to be adaptable, all of us, all 7 of us in our home, and how do we talk about that? And then also, how can we still have that flexibility within a frame that serves our family, so that the kids still feel accountable, they're still responsible for what they say and do online. They know there's people looking and counting on them. And so that there's not just this, all the rules and all the boundaries are off. So it's that give and take that's happening right now. And I just want to address that is, I'm asking myself, my husband, and certainly everyone, that's harder work, right? Yeah. To be rigid or to be totally hands-off, whatever happens right now, is a little easier than trying to find that place in the middle that's sweatier and more of a dance and more of that dynamic parenting approach.
Definitely a dance. And it's also demonstrating that wide spectrum between very liberal with a small L parents and very authoritarian parents on the other side. and where are you in that? And suddenly in these sort of circumstances, your own biases or your own approach comes very vivid, and our kids are watching us intensely to see how we react. By the way, there's a Q&A button down at the bottom, and some of you are already using it, which is great. If you are asking a question, let us know who you are and ideally where you're from. We've already had one from Louis Molero, who's tuning in from Barcelona, and this one's for you, Tiffany. After the lockdown, are we going to need an extraordinary week-long tech Sabbath instead of just a 24-hour one? What a wonderful thought, thinking of the end game here.
Well, I'm really hopeful that we're going to change our behavior. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the word screen time because I feel like it's just this blanket term and you never really know when people are monitoring their screen time. Well, are you working? Are you connecting on Zoom with friends? Is it nurturing? Is it replenishing? Or is it that you're scrolling through FOMO feeds, although we have no more FOMO right now, which is really weird. Or are you looking at stressful news that's freaking you out? Like, what are you exactly doing online? Like, I wish we could take the qualitative data one step deeper on what that is. But to get back to your question from Barcelona, I think that we're going to change our behavior. We're going to appreciate being with each other a lot more than we were. Because everyone, when they were together before, everyone had their phones out, they're talking, they're scrolling. No one was paying attention to anything. And now we know, wow, I miss being with people. I miss hugging someone. I miss like experiencing something with someone else, not in a square on Zoom, but in person. So I am hopeful. But for me, I think there's a lot of wisdom in this concept of one day off a week that has been around for over 3,000 years. And I think any practice.
Oh, Tiffany, I think we've lost you. Janelle, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
All right, we're going to wait for Tiffany's Wi-Fi to reconnect. Actually, we have a question actually from the UAE, which I'm going to direct to you. And his name is Raghav Mimani, also known as Rags. And he would say, oh, Tiffany, hi. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. Your Wi-Fi took a Sabbath. It's a little crazy. So we're coming back to you. I've got a question for Janelle from the UAE and a questioner who simply calls himself Rags. Would you recommend parental control apps to strike a balance? I mean, there's so much negative news all around and so much distraction. What's your view on parental controls, and particularly in this time?
Sure. So what I really encourage parents to do is go out and investigate what exists already and talk to other families if you can about what's working for them. My disclaimer that I issue when I talk about parental controls is that it can't be a set and forget. So that parental control cannot replace the humanness that we bring to our child, that we bring to our family. And so certainly parental controls can support the parenting, but it can't replace it. And I think in that regard, we can help with turn off times. We can help our child focus, because there's no one size fits all in tech parenting, right? As parenting 5 children, my 5 kids interface with technology in very different ways. They have very different tendencies, just like they have very different personalities, very different appetites. So some of our kids might have a harder time getting off technology or need more help regulating the use of technologies. And some of our kids might be take it or leave it a little more. So knowing our child and giving them supports that work for them, while also infusing with our humanness, our communication, the why behind why we do have parental controls, can certainly support a family. It just can't replace the work of the parents.
Can I add a little bit to that? I always love hearing Janelle talk about this. Yes, it's not one size fits all on any of this for parents or for kids. And in our family, we have a meeting that happens every 4 to 6 months, which we go over tech, chores, and sugar. Those are the topics that we seem to need to be revisiting as the situation changes and as their understanding of things change, and the way we approach talking about it might change too. So this notion of adaptability, I made this film that I'm just about to re-release called The Adaptable Mind, which is so much about what we're talking about. How do you stay nimble and adaptive to both the world and to your kids, and really see what they need and how you can support them and model behavior? I think that's so important in this conversation, is you can say all day long to your kids, you're on your screen too much or whatever you're doing on the screen, but you're on your screen. So that's why for us, whatever we do, doing it as a family and having a unified front. And I know families, I have friends that they're divorced and they have different views on screen time, and that's very hard. But under our roof right now, especially during lockdown, when we say, because we're actually not eating all our meals together. In the idyllic version of this lockdown, we're having every meal together. It's just not happening because of our schedules, but we are all having dinner together. And dinner lasts, like a half an hour during the work week, no screens at the table. And then our full day of no screens, it's like we're modeling behavior. We're saying as a family, we value one day to hang out, maybe be bored, and that's good for creativity, to just be with yourself, to read in a different way, to walk in a different way, to just exist for one day in an analog way, that we value that.
Nice. Okay, the questions keep flowing in. This time, Ivano Zappi from Italy in Milan. How do you manage the contents kids see at the moment, particularly concerning the bad news about COVID-19? And this reminds me, by the way, of the time around 9/11. How much did we let our kids see and be exposed to? Janell, how are you dealing with that at your house?
Sure. So to build off actually what Tiffany said, that there's at least, I think it's really valuable to have at least one point in the day where there's a sustained amount of time, whether it's 30 minutes or over a meal or not over a meal, where we're really doing a deliberate and intentional check-in. And so that can be about our kids' lives personally, or it can be topical, like what is something you saw in the news today that really bothered you? Or what is something you read or heard on social media that you'd like to share with the group? Number one, that's an opportunity for us to kind of fact check and process what's the source of that, like bring some media and criticism and media literacy to the table. And then also it's an emotional temperature for me to understand how much my kids are consuming or their level of anxiety around certain issues. So there's this human component we bring to intentionally processing the consumption of media and helping them be more critical of the media that they're consuming, while also taking care of their social and emotional needs. And then being really mindful of how the adults are consuming news media and how much we're talking about it. For sure, in that first week where there was so much loss around, activities, school, work, we were all feeling this great grief at once, and that rise in anxiety, we really were around the clock consuming breaking news, because it felt like every 20 minutes when we came back, there had been new information.
Right.
And so with that spike, we kind of rode the wave. And then my husband and I talked, and we thought we have to really reassess how much we're consuming, how much we're talking about what we're consuming, and kind of limiting to certain sections of the day where we kind of debrief the news, almost like a news team together. Now, certainly my kids are a little bit older, adolescents and beyond. So some of that critical thinking can be more developed and more in depth. But I think really not taking for granted what young kids overhear, and that even if they can't cognitively interpret what we're saying, they can absorb the emotion of the house. And so that we're taking deep and really good care of ourselves as individuals, that we're taking lots of breaks, because our mood and what we've consumed is very present with how we interact with our kids, how we're making our way through our lives. So it's interesting that self-care comes up in the conversation around media consumption and bad news. But I think the more that we can model regulation, the more that we can model how we're hyper-connected or scrolling and over-consuming, can be a really great teacher. And also setting up times to just totally get away from it all. Right? Totally just similar to Tiffany's platform. For some of us, that might be in not just in a 24-hour period, but we might find 1 hour a day to just decompress, to have an end of the day, that tech curfew where all the tech goes off at night. So what can we do to serve our family in a world where we can certainly have access to information around the clock, which is lovely and beautiful, but we need to set up some family boundaries around that so it doesn't take over and it doesn't become central to what's going on for the family.
Brilliant. Did you want to add anything to that, Tiffany? Oh, you're muted. You're muted. You're still muted. Hold on. Why is that? Let me see.
I think you have to unmute me. Can you hear me?
I didn't do it.
Okay, I'm good. I'm back. I was just saying, my brother is a doctor, and I've been helping him. He's been sending these dispatches out. He's working on the front lines of all this situation, and we've talked a lot about just staying healthy, and which I'm thinking about a lot as a parent in the house, wanting to be healthy for everyone. And, you know, my brothers recommended don't use an alarm clock. We're the only species that wakes ourselves up. And we're not just waking ourselves up, we're waking ourselves up with stress. If you look at the news app as first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
So I really view my day off as a double boost to my immunity. No joke. Like, I sleep more on my day without screens. There's no screens in the bedroom on that day. The kids don't have screens in the bedroom. That is a rule we have. No screens, except for now they're doing homework on it. So we have to make the exception for one of our children for that. It's about flexibility and adaptability. But I feel like to give my day a whole day to let my cortisol level go down is good for my immune system. And right now we know we have to shelter in place. Like, I've had people say, well, what if something happens? I'm like, I have a landline. If something's really important, somebody in my family will call me, but I can give my body and soul and mind a break from the stressful news. And I think what Janell said is really important, is just be careful of how you're broadcasting it, because that first week, every new scary fact was like broadcast to the house, and then it just sets the whole house stressfully. And I think just now that we're all living in this small box and no one's really leaving, to really think that everything you do is contagious. Your stress is contagious. Your joy can be contagious. Your laughing at things can be contagious. And you're staring at a screen can be contagious. So if everyone's walking around, like, there was one moment in the living room where everyone was just like, and I was like, hello, people. Like, what? Let's step out of it. We're actually in a room with people. And I think, I mean, there's been a lot of humor. I have to say, I have laughed more in the last 3 weeks in the midst of the stress. That's where the best humor comes from, is out of fear. But there's a lot of funny things being sent around amongst the stress, and also taking those moments, the moments of joy from the screen where you're just laughing your head off about the craziness of the situation. So that was a very long answer, but
not to worry. And in the humor department, a little shout out to Pluto the dog from Quebec. I don't know if you've come across Pluto, who's basically, his mother speaks through him in the most extraordinarily funny way. But
I have to check that out.
Send the link around. We're getting more questions, folks. All right, this is more for younger kids. Courtney Good in Fairfax, Virginia. Any suggestions for younger children, i.e. 3 years old, as far as screen time and tips to teach web responsibilities? Also, on how to explain the stay-at-home efforts to younger kids. Janell, do you want to have a shot at that?
No, I just had a really funny, in the spirit of humor, and then I want Janell to answer this, but I saw something online where somebody said, I told my daughter she couldn't go out and play again, and the 3-year-old said, is that because of the Corona pirates? Anyways, Janell, take it away.
Blame it on the Corona pirates.
So I actually can speak to this firsthand, because in addition to like working with families with young children and providing guidance, I also have 2 nephews who are 4 and 6. So my sister's been working really hard with them. There's some great PBS programming. I actually think it's Daniel Tiger who talks about the germ and helps to explain it to the kids. And so actually my nephew, who is 6 years old, was the one telling me, he calls me Auntie Nellie. And he was saying, Auntie Nellie, I can't come to your house because of the germ right now. So we have to stay home. So giving them language that they can understand, that, that it's sensitive language, it's thoughtful, it's intentional, but it's also heartfelt, that we're being honest with them, because certainly if they're going to preschool or they're going to daycare, or they're not seeing the people that they usually touch in their regular lives, they're going to feel a sense of loss, but not have the words that, say, a 13 or 15-year-old could express that, like, I'm really missing my soccer team. They might be acting out with some behaviors. And so having huge compassion for our young children who just don't have the language development to express those deep feelings, and might only be able to tantrum, or might only be waking up in the night when they've been sleeping through the night, or backsliding with toilet training. So these things are connected to the circumstances that we're in right now. And I think that we can be honest in a way that meets the needs of a young child, while also they might need to be on screens. I was just working privately with a family who mom and dad are both working full-time from home. One is both as social workers, actually. And so needing to see clients one-on-one over FaceTime, needing it to be quiet. And they were trading off hour to hour because they have their own 3 and 5-year-olds. Wow. And so the mom was taking some business calls in her minivan in the driveway because she needed to give her clients their full attention. And so what she was saying is, like, they're really, a lot of times, their 3 and 5-year-olds are screen free, but they've had to make that exception. So vetting what our kids are consuming, looking for high quality, nutritious screen time, and knowing that if we usually have a rigid rule, so we can do our jobs, finding something that we feel comfortable saying yes to and allowing that, and giving ourselves the peace and letting go of some of that guilt and shame that can come with what we've heard about young kids and screens.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some beautiful programming that exists out there. Some people who are really intentional in developing quality program for kids, and then really tools out there on, extra hugs and snuggles, story time, eye contact, opportunities for outdoor play, and how can you build, and this is for all ages, how can we build rhythm in routine in a world that can feel rhythmless and routineless right now?
Yeah.
And so still, if a baby takes a nap time, giving that nap time, a predictable meal time, a predictable bed and bath time. So really finding those rhythms and routines really as sacred right now, so that there can be some sense of predictability for a young child whose world has also been turned upside down.
Sure. Great.
And, I'd love to add to that, in the spirit of adding ritual and some joy in this dark period. I started doing an online baking class with my daughters and inviting everyone to join us. And we have a lot of 3-year-olds and all the way on up to just people single joining us and people with teenagers. So anyone that wants to join, it's every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I will entertain your kids for an hour baking. Hopefully you'll do it too. But it's been really fun. The other thing I will recommend is that there's a friend of mine is doing an online drawing class for young kids on Instagram. Her name's Wendy McNaughton. And maybe we can send some links around so you guys can all find it. And also in my book, 24/6, I really do divide by age, because we are talking about screen time, but I feel like it's so important. They're trying to get our attention, if they're that young. Even my kids, my youngest child, still trying to get our attention and to carve out time where we do give our attention, and thinking about things by age that don't involve screen when we do have that time, even though a lot of us are like trying to juggle and manage it all and work and be parents. But, for us, Saturday's the day where I'm really like, what do you want to do? Let's do something you want to do. And to really give them that chance. And then during the week, to still find those, even if it's just half an hour or whatever you can do, manage with your job and your home management. But that just feels really important. And again, what Janell says, just I'm all about ritual. The older I get, ritual. It creates this wonderful rhythm to your day and your week. And that's what our Tech Shabbat does. It lets me know one week is over. I have my day of joy and rest, and then another week's going to begin. And it's given back so much.
Nice. All right, I want to shift from young kids to the older ones, who I would probably suggest are suffering even more. In a way, particularly our high schoolers and our college-age kids, who are suddenly finding themselves back home with mom and dad. Are you kidding? So this is Andrea Weckrell, who's say hi from the USA. Questions for parents of teens who are in a dating situation and now can't see their boyfriend or girlfriend. What suggestions can we offer them for maintaining their closeness while suggesting they not share sexy images and behaviors that even in the best of times is risky, as most of us realize, even if such things are becoming more normal among teens and adults?
I'll take it. Do you want to take
it? I was wondering who would do that.
Okay, so I this is totally what my lived experience right now. So my 20-year-old son has his university in Boston closed, so he's back home and really, really missing his spring break. Was cut short. He was in London, and so there's been a lot of grief and loss of just the independence of being a 20-year-old young adult out in the world, his job, all of these identities, right? There's this big loss of identity of who am I if I didn't even plan on moving back home ever. And here I find myself kind of stuck, right? So I think the best thing we can do for our older kids, and then my son who's a junior and my daughter who's a sophomore in high school, is acknowledging and validating the loss of whatever they're experiencing. Right. Because I think our young people so often hear, like, just get over it. It's just a high school crush. It's just this, it's that. So to be validated by a loving and trusted adult is one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our kids, even if we want to say like, okay, get over it. There's like much worse things happening on planet Earth right now. To meet them where they are, to get curious and get them talking about their feelings is such a gift. And then also, just like we talk about sexuality at all different ages and stages of life, we need to be talking about digital sexuality. We need to be talking about reality. And so the talk, right? We know it no longer serves a young person to have that talk just once, right? But we're having that talk in an ongoing, living and breathing way. Well, right now is the time for another version of that talk. And it's about digital safety, digital reputation, digital trust in a relationship. And so thinking about what we put online, even during quarantine times or isolation times, still lives on the internet, and the internet is still very public in a lot of ways. And so it's not coming from a place of you're a terrible person for wanting to be sexual, you're a terrible person for being in love. It's, I understand that you're missing a connection, whatever that might be, and this might feel like a substitute, but let's talk about what the reality of some of these actions and behaviors are. And so I think the most honest we can be, as validating as we can be, and realistic about some of these behaviors are still going to happen, and it's our job to educate and to manage, but we will not be able to do all of the prevention. We can just do the job of showing up to do the hard work in the conversations and giving them the full spectrum of awareness that we possibly can.
Nice. Tiffany, do you have anything on this?
No, I think what Janell said was fantastic. I think, again, it's just about revisiting these important conversations that keep evolving as your kids get older, and certainly as the situation evolves. It's that there's a nimbleness and flexibility in how we're using the technology and how we're talking about it and supporting our kids in it. So right. I just think it's about, even I think I first met Janell when I read her brilliant contract for her son. And, we waited very long to get our kids smartphones. And I remember one thing that I thought about is that it was going to be on a Google Doc and we were going to keep on editing the document. And it's a living contract. And I think any relationship you have in your house, I feel like my husband and I, there's like several conversations that we've been having over 20 years, because that's what life is. Life is messy, it changes, and you have to keep revisiting how you feel about things. And that's called being human. And the more we let people know that this is an ongoing dialogue and that's going to change to the situation, the better. And that's with tech, that's with sex, that's with all of this stuff that is a part of our lives.
All right. Okay.
One part, sorry, I just want to say about practicing and teaching regulation, which is around so much happens so fast for our teenagers over technology in their social relationships, their intimate partnerships, and their just relational intelligence in general, that if we can teach them at all to, if they're about to exhibit a behavior, whether it's sexting, whether it's sharing a picture, whether it's leaving a comment, if we can ask them to take like 3 to 5 cycles of breath, or put their screen down and take a walk around the house, or check in with somebody, like, should I send this, should I say this? We know that adding that step between reaction and behavior is such a gift to our kids. So if we can just slow down our reaction time and talk to our kids about that, giving them tools where they're feeling like, oh, I might send this picture right now, and their heart rate's up and they're sweating, and maybe they're feeling like they might do something. What can they do to make sure that they really want to do that? And what breaks can they give the central nervous system to be confident in a decision that they're making, from the simplest, I want to leave this unkind comment, or I want to try reaching out to somebody that I've liked for a long time and I want to say, hey, what's up, over Snapchat, teaching them the tools for that emotional and behavioral regulation as much as possible.
Brilliant. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is so much about the prefrontal cortex and developing that muscle that makes you stop and think before you act. And that's a lot of what we're talking about in a whole bunch of different ways. I find that my whole day off with my family and my kids gives us the day to stop and think and not react. And then through the other 6 days of the week, what are the interventions that you can stop, think, and not react right away? And the internet makes it so easy to react and just tweet and snap and this and like so quickly. And what I think a lesson as parents is like that stopping and questioning is what I'm about to do represent who I am? And that is so much of life, really.
All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because in the world of the Family Online Safety Institute, we obviously focus on safety, but we also bring in privacy and security as well as part of this sort of triumvirate of issues that we deal with. Darren Lauer in British Columbia, are you finding that now that education has pivoted very quickly to online conferencing platforms, do you think we have to be careful that we're not diluting the important issues of privacy? And I'm going to combine that question with Ivano from Milan again. In Italy, we have a lot of episodes of incorrect use of apps such as Zoom, adolescents that share code of meetings with other peers to disturb lessons, some suggestions. So privacy and security.
Yeah, I had my first, we had a Zoom last week where I was giving a talk like this, and we got Zoom bombed, and it was intense. It was the Zoom webinar just like this. The same amount of people got hijacked. Pornographic images, racist images filled the screen, and we couldn't turn it off. Right. And it was, and I, then after that, that's when we started making people register. The link had gotten out. And I know that Zoom has done a new update in the last week to try to safeguard it. But I'm doing these Zoom baking classes every Friday. And I thought, oh my gosh, what if that were to happen when I've got all these young kids? And I was so nervous about it. So I added some steps for security and privacy where we had everyone register. I upped my Zoom account so I could shut off people if necessary. But that's very real. If anyone, have you guys experienced a Zoom bomb yet? No?
I haven't personally, and we set this up just with the three of us. I have seen Zooms where 120 faces show up, and I think that particular organization has already stopped doing it that way. I'm trying to feed in as many of the comments and questions as I can through the chat. But no, we were very concerned about what we had read.
Well, it's an interesting thing because on the one hand, seeing everyone's faces, I mean, I love seeing them in the chat, but it does give that energy that we're in the room with people from all over the world, which is exciting. I agree. And so I struggle with that one too, but I completely agree that we need to be looking. I'm so glad your organization exists to look at these kinds of issues because, we're in moments in our country where we've had great tragedy or dramatic events, a lot of our civil liberties have been given away.
For sure.
And we're in another one of those moments. So, even I was just hearing about some people in the Bay Area that are trying to develop tracking software of COVID that isn't owned by the government. And how do you create an anonymous version? So, I mean, that's what the other countries have been able to track it so easily. They know exactly where everyone is. And so it's bringing up all these very interesting issues that we need to be talking about.
Janell.
So I think anytime we adopt something suddenly, whether it's in a crisis or we're just very interested in it, there's going to be a massive learning curve. And so I think from the educational standpoint, I know that administrators, head of school, building principals, superintendents have tried to learn on the fly. But there's been this pressure, I think, at least in the United States, from parents of, I don't want my child to miss any learning opportunities, right? There's this intensity that we bring to education. And then also there's this been, okay, we're trying to hurry up and adapt here, but we also have to make sure that we're providing privacy and safety and proper training to our teachers who are delivering it, and then the students so that they can learn. And issues of equity have come up around this. And sometimes I've seen some teachers who were so excited to see their students online, they take a selfie with all of the kids and then share it on their Twitter account, but perhaps they don't have, the privacy of picture sharing of all of those students. So I think the call to action is to both be patient and understanding as schools try to accommodate all of the diverse learning needs. We know for sure that schools are much more of a place than just a place of learning for our young people. Often kids are getting meals there, they're getting connection, they're getting care, clothing, sometimes hygiene, and certainly somebody looking out for them. So as schools try to meet the loss of all of that while still properly educate a child and consider the deep need of privacy and accountability on the platforms, we need to be patient, but we need as parents to be getting to know the platforms that our kids are using as well. And I always say that my children's teachers and educators are my colleagues in parenthood. And so if we can come on to their team, right, instead of seeing the school did this wrong, or the school is being careless, or this teacher did this thing and violated, it's like, wait a second, how can we come on and make sure that the child is at the center of this conversation, and that we're working together to find a solution in a time that is nobody could have planned for. I know in our own district, the kids superintendent said this is in no school superintendent's guidebook, right? What to do, how to continue to educate during a pandemic. So please have that great patience. And if you're thinking about increasing your own dopamine or your own active service, think about reaching out to an educator, an administrator, a school nurse, a school mental health professional, and just saying thank you to them for the way that they've shown up or their adaptability during this time, while also considering the very real issues around privacy and training and education that go with it.
Yeah, and let's also be mindful that there are plenty of families where there are not two adults at home. You not only have single parent families, you've got families who may well live in an area where digital connection's not all that great. So there's the digital divide, then there's also the issue of how many adults are around in a supervisory role. By the way, Courtney Good, who asked the question earlier about the 3-year-old, has just thanked you, Janell, for your response and said that both she and her husband are both first responders and very much welcome your comments. And, so we have a lot of different folks balancing a lot of different things. I'm going to start to bring this conversation to a close, although I could go on for a long time, and I know you guys could. I have something here from Catherine Myers. She doesn't say where she's from, but thank you, Catherine, for your question. Quite a long comment around the vexed thing of screen time. And I know we talk about screen time, but also we talk about screen use. Screen use meaning that there are many, many different uses. I think her boiling it down, I think what she's basically saying is there another way we can describe this thing that we're trying to grapple with and not be quite so either judgmental or terrified about what this will do to our children? I guess it goes back to the original word that I used at the beginning too, of balance. Is it screen balance? Any final thoughts for Catherine or for those listening in on this issue?
I was really glad when Janell used a phrase that I think about a lot, nutritious screen time. And I actually think of a nutrition plate because I think I'm working on this animation right now that, where it used to be was like, okay, you need a certain amount of time outside of your home, take a walk. You need a certain amount of time to connect. Now, right now, that's being done online. But then you also need a certain amount of time to connect with the people in your house.
Right.
And then there's going to be a certain amount of time that you're on screens for work. And then is there some time to just tune out, which is totally, I've watched more Netflix shows. I feel like I'm caught up. I'm like, that's real too. And I'm also trying to find time to read and to write in my journal because that's much more inward and reflective. So I think the plate animation that I was working on a month ago is kind of different today because I want to add in that so much of our social time is happening online. But just think that every day you should have different portions being satisfied because that will make you feel healthy. And right now that's the main goal is our physical health and our mental health. So if you're scrolling through the news feeds way too much and it's freaking you out, that's not good for your mental health. Right. So how do you start to teach your kids to distinguish, well, you were doing something creative. You just made a film and that film's amazing. Or you were just on a Zoom and you were co-learning with your friends and just like, what's the difference between tuning out, which is totally okay. And you should have time to tune out versus scrolling to get stressed out versus scrolling to get information versus scrolling that makes you feel bad in the old world before when it was just like FOMO. So it's like, I think it's distinguishing, okay, if I can boil it down, remove my nutrition plate for a second, it's like what nourishes you and what depletes you. Those are pretty important and fundamental ways to think about anything in life, even, relationships, what nourishes and what depletes. And you could think about that with the way you're on screens too.
And recognizing once a month junk food's not such the worst thing in the world either. Janell.
Yeah, so to the nutrition metaphor, I recommend Jocelyn Brewer's work of digital nutrition out of Australia, where she's really used that parallel because nutrition and that idea of balance is something we're all pretty familiar with around how we consume food and thinking about media in that way. For me, I think of it in active and passive screen time. That's the way I've determined it in my own family. In what way do we feel like we're getting something out of it? And what way are we just kind of vegging out on it and scrolling through. But I'll just add that during the right now of all of this, one aspect that I would have, so it can shift, right? Like this more nutritious can shift and change during this time. My son, who's 17, we usually don't allow video games during the school week, right? So in the US, that's Monday through Friday. And so just because there's so much happening, well, we were in a conversation around like what's working and what isn't for you. And he was saying that when he got on to play Xbox Live with his peers, with his group of guy friends who he's very, very close to, and they were childhood friends and now they're high school buddies, he can just play the game and it like suspends reality. It's a little escapism, which I actually think is okay right now. And he said, Mom, when I'm on there, the world just feels normal. It feels regular. And had he not communicated that to me, I would have seen his time gaming as less nutritious, or I would have counted that in like the passive or kind of non-nutritious play. But when he was able to communicate his needs, I saw it in a whole new way. And I was able to shift and change some of the boundaries that we have around this during this time, knowing we might go back to a different way after this. So in that, it's like giving the child or the teenager voice to screen time that feels productive and healthy, like Tiffany was saying, like useful, and then also determining together when that, we call it scroll for no reason, right? Kind of that's just that passive scrolling, and how do we limit that and address some of the feelings that might come up. So something that was nutritious or not nutritious a month ago might feel incredibly necessary and nutritious now. So suspending that judgment around it and being kind to ourselves. I just want to make sure that the goal right now or at any point should never be perfection. And it's just how can we do the best that we can under the circumstances that we're in right now? And how do we show up for the people we love and just check in on them and make sure that they're doing okay, make sure that we're doing okay. And the ask should be never, have I gotten this perfectly right? There is no trophy at the end of this. And this is more of a message for myself because I live in that space of how can I get this right? That's just my natural default setting. How can I master this? And how can I get this right? And part of the growth and learning for me in this experience is how can it be good enough to meet the needs of the people?
Yeah, I was just about to quote the wonderful book, The Good Enough Parent, and you beat me to it, Janell. Fantastic. If you haven't, rush out. No, you can't rush out. Go to Amazon and get it. It's still a classic. I think it goes back to the 1980s, but The Good Enough Parent. Do you remember the author? Does that ring a bell? Oh, well, never mind. Go online and nutritionally search for it. I'm going to start to bring this to a close. Something I forgot to mention also, maybe this is more locally, and Comcast have been handing over parts of their network for schools to do classes and lessons online, not online, sorry, this is the point, through the television, through cable. The BBC is doing something similar. So old screens, old traditional media is also trying to adapt to this, particularly to reach families and kids who are not online, which we must remain extremely mindful of. Because particularly when we do finally get back to some new normal, whatever that is, there's going to be a whole chunk of kids who are going to be having to play catch up in a way that will just simply show the greater disparity that exists in our world between the haves and the have-nots. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Janell, for coming in from Cape Cod. Thank you, Tiffany, from Marin County? Where are you from?
Mill Valley. Yeah, the Bay Area.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. From our many, many participants from all over the world, thank you so much for your questions, for your participation. We're going to we have recorded this. This is going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next day or two. So if you'd like some happy, nutritious, passive viewing, come on back, let your friends and neighbors know as well. If you want more information on what we're providing, FOSI.org, Good Digital Parenting, there's the 7 steps to good digital parenting, there's contracts, there's blogs, there's all kinds of good stuff for you there. Our next webinar is next week. We're going to be doing one on encryption and vulnerable communities, more of a policy-focused discussion, but still a vital one and an important one. So anyway, thank you two both very much.
And can we send, if people want to join the baking class, we'll send you some links to share with the participants on our work. That would be great. Absolutely.
And Janell, if you have anything that you'd really love to share with people, send it along. I'm sure we can send that out. All right. Well, thank you again. Get out if there's bright sunshine in your neighborhood. Go out and get some. If not, just hang in there. But anyway, thank you all very much, and we'll see
Thank
you
you
again.
both.
Take
All
care
right.
Thank
of
you,
yourselves,
everyone.
everybody. Be well.